I never expected life to hand me a 1,200-acre property. Honestly, when I got the letter, I thought it was some kind of scam. "Congratulations, you've inherited land you didn't know existed," I muttered to myself. I pictured rolling fields, quiet lakes, maybe even a cabin with a porch swing. A peaceful escape from the chaos of life. But the moment I drove up the winding dirt road, my dream started to feel like a nightmare. My heart sank as I saw rows of houses, fences, and lawns meticulously maintained, but none of it belonged to me. Well, technically it did, but every square inch was occupied by people who acted like they owned it. My 1,200 acres had been turned into their playground. I parked my truck and stepped out, the smell of pine and fresh earth mingling with the faint aroma of barbecue smoke. Then I saw her, standing on what should have been my property, clipboard in hand, giving orders to a group of neighbors like some kind of queen bee. Her smile was tight, practiced, almost mocking. "Welcome to the community," she said, as if I were the intruder. A knot formed in my stomach. This was not a friendly HOA, it was an army, a small town that had declared war on me before I even knew I existed. And they were all squatting like they had been doing it for decades. A community pond glimmered in the sunlight with docks and fishing poles everywhere. A small wooden cabin near the woods looked cozy, but again, not mine, or at least that's what they thought. I tried to smile to keep my voice calm. Hi, I think there's been a mistake. This is my property." The woman tilted her head, her smirk widening. "Oh, we know," she said, "but it's been our community for years. You must understand you're the new owner, but you're stepping into our world now." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Our world? This wasn't their world, it was mine. The reality of it was suffocating. I had inherited not just land, but a problem bigger than anything I'd imagined. As I walked further onto my property, neighbors emerged from behind fences, waving at me with fake friendliness. Some smiled warmly, but the glint in their eyes told a different story. Curiosity, yes, but also suspicion, ownership, challenge. Every step I took, I felt their gaze piercing through me, silently daring me to challenge them. I knew I couldn't back down. Not now. Not after driving hundreds of miles, not after seeing the home my ancestor had built, the land they had worked so hard for being treated like a communal playground. And that's when I realized, if I didn't act, they would never leave. They would keep building, expanding, and treating my land as their own. I walked up to the HOA president again. "Listen, I don't want trouble," I said, keeping my voice firm but calm. "I just need you to understand, this land belongs to me now. Everything on it, everything in this area, my property. You and everyone else need to leave." Her laughter rang out, sharp and cruel, bouncing off the tree line. "Leave. You can't just tell us to leave. This is our community. You're new here, but rules still apply, rules we've been living by for decades." I felt my jaw tighten. My pulse raced. The absurdity of it all made my stomach churn. Rules they made up, on my land. But beneath the frustration, a spark of determination lit up inside me. I would not let them intimidate me. I would not be pushed around by a self-appointed ruler and her tiny army. I took a deep breath, staring at the stretch of trees, ponds, and cabins that were mine by right but not by control. For the first time, I realized this inheritance was not going to be peaceful. It was going to be a battle I didn't choose but now had no choice but to fight. And in that moment, I promised myself, I wasn't just going to reclaim the land. I was going to show them exactly who really owns it. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of fear, but because my mind wouldn't stop replaying her laugh. That confident, dismissive laugh that said, "You don't belong here." By sunrise, I was back on the land. My land. Fog hung low over the trees, the kind that makes everything feel quiet and dangerous at the same time. I stood there holding the deed in my hand like it was a shield, reminding myself this wasn't emotion, it was fact. Paper, law, truth. That illusion lasted about 10 minutes. A white SUV rolled up beside me, slow and deliberate like it owned the road. A man stepped out wearing a polo shirt with an embroidered HOA logo, clipboard tucked under his arm, smile wide and empty. "Morning," he said. "You're parked in a restricted community zone." I laughed before I could stop myself, not because it was funny, but because it was insane. "This entire zone," I said calmly, "is mine." His smile didn't move. According to our records, this area falls under HOA jurisdiction. That's when I realized something chilling. They weren't confused. They weren't mistaken. They were confident. I started walking. Every step felt heavier than the last, like the land itself was warning me. Fences appeared where none should exist. Fresh paint, new signs, community garden, private access, residents only. Residents on my inheritance. Then I saw the pond again, kids laughing, adults fishing. A dock built clean and sturdy recent. Someone had invested money here. Someone believed this was permanent. I asked an older man sitting by the water how long the HOA had been using the land. He didn't look at me when he answered. "Longer than you've been around," he said quietly. That sentence stayed with me. Not because it was true, but because it was a threat. By midday, the HOA president called a casual meeting. Casual meant 30 people forming a half circle around me like a jury that had already decided the verdict. She stood in the middle, calm, controlled, smiling like she was doing me a favor. "We want this to be easy," she said. "You can enjoy your land, what's left of it, but the community stays." I felt my chest tighten. "You're trespassing." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. She raised a hand. "We've paid dues, maintained the land, improved it. That gives us rights." "No," I said. "It gives you confidence, not ownership." Her eyes hardened. "Be careful. People who fight the HOA usually regret it." That was the moment something shifted inside me. Up until then, I was trying to be reasonable, polite, civil. But standing there, surrounded by people who had decided I was the problem, I understood the truth. They weren't going to negotiate. They were going to wear me down. That afternoon, I tried to access a dirt road leading deeper into the property. A brand new gate blocked it. Locked, heavy duty. I stared at it for a long time. Then I noticed the sign zip-tied to the fence. Unauthorized entry subject to fines. Fines. On my own land. I felt anger rise, but beneath it was something worse. Fear, not the loud kind, the quiet kind that whispers, "What if they've already won?" I drove home and spread every document across the table. Deeds, surveys, old maps, and that's when I saw it. A boundary line they had slowly pushed back year after year, not overnight, not aggressively, carefully, quietly. They hadn't squatted by accident. They'd planned this. My phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. HOA notice. Any attempt to disrupt community operations will result in penalties and legal action. No signature. No apology. Just confidence. I stared at the screen, feeling something harden in my chest. They thought intimidation would make me disappear. They thought I'd sell, walk away, give up. They didn't know me. I closed the folder, stood up, and looked out the window toward the dark outline of the land in the distance. I wasn't leaving. I wasn't selling. And I definitely wasn't playing nice anymore. Because if they wanted a war of rules, boundaries, and patience, I was about to show them what happens when the actual owner stops asking and starts taking notes. And they had no idea what I was about to uncover next. The first thing I learned was this: people only get aggressive when they're afraid of being exposed. So instead of arguing, instead of confronting anyone, I went quiet. No calls, no emails, no showing up to their casual meetings. I let them think the pressure was working, that I was tired, confused, maybe even scared enough to back off. Meanwhile, every morning before sunrise, I was out there. I walked the land slowly, deliberately, like I was listening to it tell me its story. I brought a camera, a notebook, and the original survey maps folded and worn from age. The kind of maps that don't lie because they were drawn long before anyone thought an HOA would exist. That's when I started noticing the details. The fences weren't random. They curved inward, shaving off acres at a time. The walking trails conveniently avoided original boundary markers. The community cabins were all built just far enough inside my land to feel permanent, but close enough to argue mistake. It wasn't a mistake. It was strategy. By the third day, they noticed me. Cars slowed when they passed. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Someone took photos of me from a porch, pretending to check their phone. Another person followed me for nearly half a mile before turning around like it was nothing. I felt watched, measured, tested, and then I found it. Hidden behind a line of trees was a storage shed, newer than everything else. No signage, no markings. Inside were tools, construction supplies, and printed maps. My maps, or copies of them, with handwritten notes along the edges. Lines adjusted. Borders redrawn. Dates circled. My stomach dropped. They weren't just using my land, they were studying it, planning future expansion like it was already theirs. That's when it stopped feeling like a dispute and started feeling like theft, organized, deliberate theft. That evening, as I was loading equipment into my truck, the HOA president appeared again. This time, no smile, no clipboard, just cold confidence. "You shouldn't be back here alone," she said. I didn't turn around. Funny, I was thinking the same thing about you. She stepped closer. People get hurt when they poke around in places they don't belong. I finally faced her. "Then maybe you should stop trespassing." For a moment there was silence. Then she leaned in and lowered her voice. "You think paper matters out here, community matters, history matters, and you're standing in the way of both." That was the first time she admitted it. Not ownership. Control. That night I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was wrong. Too many new structures, too much money invested, too much confidence for people who supposedly had no rights. So I started digging. Public records, old permits, HOA filings, and buried deep in a stack of documents was something that made my blood run cold. They had filed expansion plans years ago, using misleading boundaries, assuming no one would ever challenge them. They didn't expect an inheritance. They didn't expect me. The next morning I found fresh tire tracks cutting across a protected section of the land, trees marked with spray paint, bright, careless lines. They were moving fast now. My phone buzzed again, another message. Final notice. Any interference with approved HOA development will result in immediate enforcement. No law firm. No authority. Just pressure. I stood there staring at the marked trees, the kind my family had protected for generations, and felt something inside me finally snap. They weren't just stealing land. They were erasing history. And that's when I made the decision. No more observing. No more documenting quietly. If they wanted to play this game in the shadows, I was about to drag everything into the light. Because once people like that realize you're not afraid to expose them, they stop pretending. And when they stop pretending, they make mistakes. The moment you decide to stop being polite, the world reacts. Not loudly at first, but sharply, like something brittle finally cracking. I put up the first sign at sunrise. Simple, black letters on white metal. Private property, no trespassing. I placed it right where their walking trail entered the woods. Not hidden, not aggressive, just visible enough that no one could pretend they didn't see it. As I stepped back, I felt calm for the first time in days, not victory, clarity. That calm lasted exactly 20 minutes. A woman stormed toward me, phone already recording. "You can't do this," she snapped. "This is a shared trail." "It's not," I said evenly. "It never was." Within an hour, 3 more signs appeared, mine. Within 2 hours, 2 of them were gone, ripped clean from the ground like they'd never existed. That's when the sheriff showed up. He was polite, careful, the kind of calm that means he's already heard one side of the story. He asked me to explain why I was causing disruption. I handed him the deed, the maps, the survey. He looked at them longer than I expected. Then he sighed. "This is civil," he said quietly, "but you should know this HOA calls a lot." That sentence hit harder than a threat. They weren't just loud. They were connected. By noon, the HOA president called an emergency meeting. Not advertised, not open, just a crowd forming like they'd been waiting for permission to surround me. "You're escalating," she said, her voice smooth and rehearsed, "and that puts everyone at risk." "No," I replied. "Ignoring property lines put everyone at risk. I'm just drawing them again." She smiled, but her eyes were sharp. "Then you leave us no choice." That evening, a letter appeared taped to my truck. No envelope, just paper flapping in the wind. HOA fine, unauthorized signage, $5,000. I laughed out loud, not because it was funny, but because it was insulting. They were trying to scare me with fake authority. But then I noticed something else. The date. It was backdated. They were creating a paper trail. One that made me look like the aggressor. That night, floodlights came on near the cabins, brighter than usual. Cameras angled toward the tree line, toward me. They were watching. Waiting. I barely slept. Every sound outside felt intentional. A door closing, an engine idling too long. When morning came, I drove straight to the far edge of the property, the place they never wanted me to go. And that's where I found the bulldozer. Parked, fueled, ready. No permits posted, no notices, just heavy machinery sitting on my land like it belonged there. Nearby, stakes marked a wide clearing, bigger than anything I'd seen before. They weren't planning to ask. They were planning to erase. My phone rang, unknown number. "You've made your point," the HOA president said calmly. "Now stop, before this turns into something you can't control." I looked at the machine, at the trees marked for removal, at the years of quiet encroachment that had led to this moment. "This already is something I can't ignore," I said. She paused, last chance. I hung up. That was it, no more signs, no more warnings, no more pretending this was a misunderstanding. They thought pressure would fold me. They thought authority was something you could fake long enough to make it real. But they forgot one thing. Land remembers. Records remember. And so do people who refuse to be pushed off what's theirs. As I drove away, I made a call of my own. Not to argue, not to threaten. To prepare. Because the next time we faced each other, it wouldn't be about signs or fines. It would be about proof. The call I made that morning wasn't dramatic. No raised voice. No anger, just facts, dates, boundaries, names, the kind of conversation that doesn't feel powerful in the moment, but changes everything later. By noon, the tone around the property shifted. Not openly, not yet, but I could feel it. Cars that used to slow down now sped past. People avoided eye contact. The confidence I'd been seeing for weeks was cracking, replaced by something tighter, controlled. That's when the letters started arriving. Real envelopes this time, certified, legal language. They accused me of harassment, of interfering with long-standing community operations. One even claimed I was threatening residents by existing near their homes. I laid them out on the table and read them slowly, not because I was worried, but because I wanted to understand their strategy. They were burying me. Paper over truth. Noise over facts. That afternoon, I walked the perimeter again, this time with a licensed surveyor. Bright vest, tripod, GPS equipment that didn't care about opinions. People gathered almost immediately. Some whispered, some filmed. One man shouted that we were trespassing. The surveyor didn't respond. He just kept measuring, marking, recording. And then it happened. The HOA president arrived with two men I didn't recognize. Suits. Confident, the kind of confidence that comes from charging by the hour. She pointed at the survey stakes. "Those are incorrect." The surveyor didn't look up. "They're not." Her smile vanished. "You're causing disruption." He finally met her eyes. "Ma'am, you're standing on private land." That was the first time I saw fear. Real fear, not anger, not arrogance. Just the sudden realization that someone neutral had entered the picture and they couldn't control him. But fear makes people reckless. That night someone crossed a line, literally. I woke to the sound of metal scraping stone. When I got there, half the survey markers were gone, pulled clean, thrown into the brush like trash. That wasn't ignorance. That was destruction of evidence. I took photos, videos, wide shots, close-ups, time-stamps, everything. Then I noticed fresh tire tracks again, leading straight to the bulldozer. They weren't backing down. They were accelerating. My phone rang just after sunset, a blocked number. "This is your warning," a man said, not the president, someone colder. "You're going to lose more than land if you keep this up." I waited for my heart to race. It didn't. "Documenting this call," I said calmly. "Anything else you want on record?" The line went dead. That's when I knew I'd crossed it. The line between intimidation and exposure, between bluff and liability. The next morning, official notices went up. Not mine, not theirs, county notices, stop work orders, red tags on machinery. The bulldozer sat silent. For the first time, so did they. But silence doesn't mean surrender, it means regrouping. I found out later they'd called an emergency HOA vote. Closed door, no minutes, no transparency. The kind of meeting where decisions are made fast and accountability is avoided. Whatever they decided in that room, I could feel it coming. Because when people realize they might lose everything, they stop caring about how it looks. They care about winning. And I had a feeling their next move wouldn't be quiet, legal, or subtle. The quiet didn't last, it never does. For 2 days, nothing happened. No letters, no meetings, no sudden patrol cars creeping down the road. The land felt different, too still, like everything was holding its breath. I knew better than to believe it was over. People who lose control don't accept it quietly. They look for another way to take it back. On the third morning, I woke up to a chain across the access road. Heavy, industrial, locked tight. A new sign hung from it, still smelling like fresh paint. Community Road, authorized vehicles only. I stared at it for a long time. That road existed before the HOA, before the houses, before any of them. And yet here it was, blocked, claimed, rewritten. I didn't touch it, I photographed it, every angle, every bolt. Then I drove around using a longer route, one they clearly hadn't considered. That's when I saw the real problem. They had started building again. Not the big clearing, something smaller, smarter. A structure just inside the false boundary they'd been pushing for years. If it stood long enough, they could argue it was established, permanent, grandfathered. They were trying to run out the clock. I parked and watched from a distance. Workers moved quickly, avoiding eye contact. No permits posted. No logos on the trucks. Everything about it screamed intentional deniability. That afternoon, the HOA president finally called me, not threatening, not calm, tired. "We need to talk," she said. "We've been talking," I replied. "No," she said quietly. "You've been documenting, there's a difference." She was right, and she hated it. She asked to meet at the community center. I agreed, but not alone. I brought copies of everything, surveys, photos, notices, timelines. A story laid out so clearly it couldn't be misunderstood. When I walked in, the room was full. Too full, residents, board members, the two men in suits again. She started speaking first, framing it as a misunderstanding, a legacy issue, an unfortunate overlap of records. I waited. Then I stood up and placed the documents on the table, one by one, slowly. "This isn't confusion," I said. "This is expansion." No shouting, no drama, just silence. One of the lawyers finally spoke. "If what you're claiming is accurate, this could expose the HOA to significant liability." "That's why I'm here," I said, "to stop it before it gets worse." The president's jaw tightened. She knew she'd lost control of the room. But control doesn't disappear quietly. That night, someone crossed another line. I found one of my trail cameras smashed. Not stolen, smashed like a message. They were angry now. I replaced it with two more, higher, hidden better, and I stopped waiting for permission to protect what was mine. The next morning I filed formal trespass notices. Certified, delivered, no emotion, just consequences. By evening, rumors spread. People started asking questions, the kind of questions HOAs hate, about dues, about liability, about who would be responsible if this went public. The confidence was gone. In its place was panic. And panic makes people sloppy. Because the next thing they tried, they put in writing. An email sent to the wrong person, forwarded twice before it reached me. Plans, dates, a proposal to resolve the land issue quietly. Quietly meant without admitting fault. Quietly meant without returning everything. I leaned back in my chair and read it again. They weren't offering peace. They were offering a cover-up. And that's when I realized something important. This was no longer about me reclaiming land. It was about exposing a system that had been abusing power for years. And once that truth was out, there would be no going back. I didn't respond to the email. Not immediately. Silence can be louder than confrontation, and I wanted them to sit with it, to wonder who else had seen their plan, to feel the weight of their own words turning into evidence. Instead, I did something they never expected. I shared the facts, not publicly, not online, quietly, with the people who mattered most. County officials, a land use investigator, an environmental officer. I didn't exaggerate, I didn't accuse. I just handed them the timeline and let it speak for itself. Within a week, the land was crawling with clipboards. Inspections, measurements, photos, questions no one in the HOA wanted to answer. Residents started whispering again, but this time the tone had changed. Confusion replaced confidence. Fear replaced entitlement. One afternoon, as I stood near the pond they'd claimed for years, a woman approached me. She looked tired, not angry. "I didn't know," she said quietly. "They told us it was all approved." I believed her, and that's what hurt the most. This wasn't just about land anymore. It was about people who'd been misled into thinking rules could replace reality. The HOA president called an emergency assembly. Open this time, cameras everywhere, voices raised, accusations flying in every direction. She tried to control it, tried to spin it. But once people start asking where their dues went, authority collapses fast. Then the letter arrived. Official stamped, heavy with consequence. A cease and desist order. Pending investigation. All expansion frozen. I watched her read it from across the room. The color drained from her face. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked small. But desperation makes people reckless. That evening she confronted me alone. No audience, no board, just anger stripped of polish. "You're destroying this community," she hissed. "No," I said calmly. "I'm showing it the truth." She laughed, but it cracked halfway through. "You think you've won? This isn't over." She was right, it was. Because the next morning, everything exploded. A resident filed a complaint, then another. Then 3 more, about fees, about threats, about being pressured to support expansions they never approved. The investigation widened. Bank records were requested. Emails subpoenaed. Meetings revisited. What started as a land dispute became something much bigger. I sat at my kitchen table watching it unfold, feeling a strange mix of relief and weight. I hadn't planned this. I just refused to step aside. By the end of the week, the HOA president resigned. Quietly. No statement, no farewell, just gone. But her absence didn't bring peace. It brought exposure. Because once the leadership cracked, everything they'd buried came to the surface. And standing there, watching the land finally breathe again, I knew one thing for certain. The final chapter wouldn't be about revenge. It would be about consequences. When people imagine winning a battle like this, they picture celebration, relief, maybe even applause, but the truth is quieter than that, heavier. The land didn't suddenly feel triumphant when it was returned to me. It felt tired, like it had been carrying everyone else's assumptions for years and was finally being allowed to rest. The investigation wrapped up slowly the way all real consequences do. No dramatic arrests, no shouting matches, just paperwork decisions and signatures that couldn't be undone. The HOA was dissolved, not restructured, not renamed, dissolved. Structures that crossed the true boundary were ordered removed. Some came down in days, others took months. People packed up pieces of a life they believed was permanent and moved them back, foot by foot, into what was actually theirs. Some were angry. Some were embarrassed. Most were quiet. A few came to talk to me, not to argue, but to understand. "I really thought it was all legal," one man said, staring at the ground. "I know," I told him, and I meant it. Because the scariest part of all of this wasn't the bullying or the threats. It was how easy it had been for lies to become normal. The pond went still. No more meetings, no more fences creeping forward, just water reflecting the trees the way it always should have. I walked the boundaries again, this time without a camera, without a notebook, just me and the land as it actually was, whole, honest. I didn't feel victorious, I felt responsible. Because inheriting 1,200 acres wasn't just about ownership. It was about stewardship, about paying attention when people assume you won't, about standing your ground when the easier path is to walk away and let someone else rewrite reality. The HOA president never reached out again. I heard she moved, maybe to another community, maybe to another place where rules feel easier to bend when no one's watching. As for me, I learned something I'll never forget. Power doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it wears a clipboard and a smile. Sometimes it hides behind phrases like community standards and long-standing practice. And sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can do is stay quiet when you know the truth. I didn't set out to fight an HOA. I didn't plan to expose anyone. I just refused to disappear. And in the end, that was enough. Because land doesn't need defending with anger. It needs defending with clarity. And once clarity arrives, everything else has to move. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one. The truth that shatters everything you thought you knew.